All right, Joe, we're good.
Okay, everybody good to go? Everybody okay to start? Yep. Gary, you good? Just want to make sure Gary's good.
Yep, sorry, I'm here.
Okay, all right, awesome. Okay, all right, so thank you, everybody. Adequate notice has been given, and we are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I'm going to ask everybody to stand, and we've got that flag and Sean's background. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
and
one nation,
under God,
under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, as we start, I just wanted to say a few things, but kind of before we start the meeting. I want to start by saying I think it's interesting that we say the pledge at each meeting, and it ends with liberty and justice for all. And right now in our country, we don't have liberty and justice for everybody, right? In particular, people of color, in particular, for Black people. And when you look at the stats, right, whether it's around incarceration, whether it's around discipline, whether it's around COVID, whether it's around who we have in AP and honors, it's disproportionate, right? And so I just want to honor that Black lives do matter. And I want to challenge us as a board to do what we can to be a part of the solution. And so I just wanted to start there. I know maybe Sean wants to say something real quick, and then I'm going to open it up. Actually, I know it's a little bit unique, but I'm going to ask each of you, if you want to say something, you can. You certainly don't have to. So Sean.
Thanks, Joe. Well, good evening, everyone. It's good to see everyone, and good to see our new board members too. I will say tonight I'm having a feeling of mixture of emotions, and I can't help but feel a little discouraged right now by a lot of the events that are happening in the world, such as another wrongful death of a Black individual by the hands that were meant to protect him. And then I also am discouraged by some of the things we're hearing from alumni recently about examples of racism that they've experienced or have seen against our Black students. And so I also can't help to feel hopeful. And recent marches and protests have really been a cry for change, just not for these individual situations, but for systemic racism that we see. And I feel like there's a momentum that we haven't felt in a long time or ever, probably. Yes, on Monday, I attended a march that was organized by some of our alumni. And it was difficult actually to hear some of the words that they were sharing and some of the stories that they were sharing about injustice they experienced. And I just want to say that I heard them, and we're proud of their strong voices and feel committed to making sure that we're always a better school system. When we were walking, Jason and I were talking at the end, and one of the things he said, he's like, tonight was like an example of the profile of the graduate, and thinking about students who are culturally competent, thinking about students who are collaborators, and thinking about empathy. And so as a leader of the district, I am committed to always being better. And so I just feel it's really necessary to say that. I never want any of our students or parents or community members to feel marginalized in our community. And I am committed to looking closely at our systems, our behaviors and policies that would contribute to racism. So we can't go back and change what's happened in the past or things that have occurred, but I will say that we're committed to moving forward in a direction that is going to really focus on how we can be better with racial equality. And so I do appreciate being part of a community that holds us to a high standard and holds me to a high standard. So that's all I had to say.
Thanks, Sean. So I am going to open it up, but I do want to just note something, which I should have said is, we didn't put this as a topic to discuss. So these are your comments, but this really isn't, because we might have a discussion another time, but this isn't a discussion. So I'm going to open it up if any other board member wants to say something. But again, I just want to emphasize it's not a discussion because we didn't put it on as a topic. And I know, Jason, you had told me before you wanted to say something. So do you want to go next?
Yeah, well, I'll just say this. Number one, I really want to once again thank Laura Kovalescu and Grace, Mom, for putting that event together. And I'm honored that they would ask me to speak at the event along with some other great alumni. Liam, who actually works for me right now, who used to work for me for like the last 2 years. And seeing all these young folks convey their feelings about their time at Clayton and how they're feeling about it, and what they had to go through and what they're thinking about as older adults now that they're completed their first year or second year of college. And so I want to say thank you to those folks. And the last thing I want to say, I don't want to continue my stump speech. Well, not stump speech, but the speech I had on Monday. But I do want to make sure that everyone is on board for change, like real change. Like we talk about these amazing words like equity and responsive teaching, and all these things are cool. And what happens is we're smart, we're academics, we're trained, right? We went to college, we got our masters or our PhDs, and we become good at adopting language. But then what we're not good at is implementation. So I think this is a moment in time. And this, by the way, this isn't just about Black Lives Matter or George Floyd dying, although the spark is that incident. But it's also just as a board in general, we need to be thinking about, as we've all said and articulated over and over, how are we going to make our school system, our school district, the best it can be? So anyway, that's all I have to say. But it's an unfortunate situation, but I'm glad people are engaged and tuned in to what's happening, and we'll see how it goes. So thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Are there others that want to say anything? You could unmute yourself or raise your hand, either one, I guess.
Joe, I'll say something.
Okay, go ahead, Amy.
It's good to see everybody tonight. So I was thinking about how with everything that's been going on, especially the situation in Minneapolis, that it's so sad and unsettling and concerning, and unfortunate that in this day and age we're still trying to deal with this systemic type of racism that we're dealing with. But it also kind of occurred to me that it's while as sad and unsettling as it is, it's can also present a unique opportunity for us to teach our kids about collective action and coming together as a community, and how our collective action can affect change and impact the future. And also learning about linking the past move. I sincerely hope that all of our educators shares, the common belief that we need to eradicate racial inequities, and that we are going to continue to address it head on and directly. So that's really all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Amy. I think I saw some other hands. I might have seen Stacy's. Go ahead, Stacy.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Thanks, Joe, and Jason and Amy. I just want to say, to add to that, I want to thank Jason for speaking on Saturday. I think his voice is so important as a leader in our district and our community. And I was so energized by all the young people that were there. And it did make me feel hopeful, like Sean said, because they are actively engaged in this movement. And as a school district, we're in the business of education, and I actually feel that schools are an ideal place to facilitate the conversations we need to have to make the changes that need to occur. So I think that as a school board and as a district, we have a unique opportunity to provide opportunities for our young people to make changes. But as a school board and a district, we also, have a responsibility to make sure we are providing an equitable education and that we are making sure that all of our students are socially and emotionally healthy. And I think that this gives us even more reason to check in on our Black students on their social and emotional health. But I also want to thank Sean for being such a great leader in this work. He has prioritized racial equity in our curriculum, and I know that that will continue to be a priority of his in the district. And I just wanted to mention that as an example, the Educational March for Justice, which is scheduled for this Saturday, I think is a great example of our district providing educational opportunities for the community to learn about the history of African Americans and Black families that lived in our community, and as a hands-on activity for people of all ages. So like I said, I just think as a school district, we have such a huge responsibility, but also are in an ideal situation to provide change and opportunities to facilitate conversation with our young people.
Thank you. Thank you, Stacy. Others, maybe I saw somebody else's hand. Anybody else want to say anything? Go ahead, Lily.
I didn't know we were going to have an opportunity to say something, so I don't want to just kind of off the top of my head. I'm going to say a goodbye real quickly in a bit. So I'll say a little something. It just happens to be part of my goodbye. But yeah, I think you all, I hope that you know that had I prepared, I care about this very deeply and am committed to it. So had I prepared a statement, you probably would have heard a mouthful. So that's all.
Thank you, Lily. Gary, go ahead.
Thanks, Joe. I just wanted to say two things really quickly, kind of relating to Monday's event. Number one, I told Jason this, I was sorry to have to hear him talk about the things that he talked about, that he's experienced. I also told him that I admired that he did it. So, because I'm sure there's a lot of that that's not hard. So I appreciate that. And the other thing that I was thinking about on this day, in a little while, some of us have to say an oath, and in that oath, to be sworn in as a board member, it talks about defending the Constitution. And when you're a lawyer, you're in law school, and you read about the Constitution and all these things, you think you know what they mean, and you think you know what that phrase. It sounds very patriotic and maybe even a little bit trite to defend the Constitution, but it kind of takes on new meaning right now, and to be honest, in a painful way, that we have that duty that we need to be thinking about, because there's some people that have not done that, and we need to all be thinking about that as an example of defending the Constitution and all of the freedoms that it expresses. So that really struck me. I guess I didn't remember saying that before in my Board of Education oath, but defending the Constitution is part of it for all of us. And so that's, when I say that, that's going to take on a heavier and a more impactful meeting tonight.
Thank you, Gary. I think, Did anybody else want to say anything? I think everybody spoke. Adam, you didn't speak, but you're good.
I'll do it during student communications.
Well, there's not, it's a little bit different because there's not really student communication. So that's
I
part of
thought-
why
I
we
looked at the
mixed it
agenda,
up.
But yeah, sure. Then I'll go ahead now. I wanted to talk a little bit about the protest and just the power of students. And I think now would be a good time as much as any. And so I did want to thank Grace Mom and Laura Parvalescu and Brooke Becker and all the folks who helped out with planning the protest and who did such an amazing job. I thought it was really successful, and it was amazing to me, not only because it was the first time that I had seen a lot of my friends in a long time, but the fact that so many of them were there and that it did feel like I was with my community and that I was standing there with my community and marching with my community, which I think was really important. And for me it was important knowing that and knowing that they were there with everyone else and that we were standing together. And I thought again, hearing the voices of alumni was really powerful, and hearing their stories is the best thing that we can do as a community, and hearing stories of oppression is important, and it's what we need to do. And so I think that was just another great example of how our community is rallying behind those voices. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was just the idea of why student voice is so important. And I think that that's, this is part of the reason that I'm here. This is part of the reason that you all went along with this process, was because you all know that student voice is powerful and it can create change. And it just made me think of my cultural leadership journey and when we visited Birmingham, Alabama, and we learned about the Children's Crusade. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that on May 2nd, 1963, seventh grader Gwendolyn Sanders helped organize her classmates and hundreds of kids from high schoolers down to first graders who joined her in a massive walkout, defying the principal of Parker High School, who attempted to lock the gates to keep students inside. And that day was a turning point in the history of protests and a turning point in what we know as what it means to march. And there was a new leader in protests. There was a new leader in walkouts, and that was students, that was young people, people who know how to make change. And I think that now more than ever, it's important that we recognize those students who are trying to do that today. And so I just want to say that I appreciate them and that I will stand there with them.
Thank you. And again, I thank you for everybody's comments. Again, we will have a discussion at some point, but not right now. So we're going to move on to public comments. I do want to just say one thing about public comments. We often don't read kind of the fine print of the public comments. But this time I feel the need to, because we had a number of public comments that we can't read tonight. So if a public, it says very clearly, I'll read to you, speakers' comments are not to address the board concerning specific personnel issues at a meeting. A comment will not be read if it's addressing a personnel issue. So we do have a couple folks who submitted a public comment around that. So I just want to honor that we can't read those. Certainly the administration will take note and respond accordingly, but we can't read those in public. So having said that, I do think there is a public comment or two that we can read, but I just kind of want to say that for the sake of the public. So I don't know, Sean or Chris, if you're going to read the public comments, we can.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so there is one public comment left to read, and that's from Ariane Sehi. And that comment reads as follows. There are not enough words to describe my outrage and disappointment in the complacency of the school district of Clayton and Clayton High School in its treatment of Black students. As a non-Black student of color, I am incredibly heartbroken to know that there were countless instances of covert and overt forms of racism, bigotry, and oppression of my fellow Black students and friends throughout my 13 years in the district, and their concerns were ignored or they were silenced. The core values of the school district of Clayton are excellence, trust, inclusiveness, innovation, and accountability. Our district is not excellent when they are not meeting the high expectations of their community to do more to actively combat racism in its schools. Our district is not trustworthy when students do not feel comfortable speaking up for the injustices they face year after year, knowing that the school will do nothing to address the situation. Our district is not inclusive when our honors and AP courses are not diverse and inclusive of all individuals and support their academic development, not discourage them from achievement. Our district is not innovative by relying upon an anonymous tip line and anti-bias training that is clearly not effective, that is not actively being practiced. Our district is not accountable to its actions when it refuses to address serious problems of racism and bigotry and take the appropriate measures to sanction any students, teachers, or staff that engage in any acts of racism or bigotry. One way in which our district can make immense changes in its conversations about race and identity is by revising the K-12 history and literacy curriculum to include a more accurate representation and less whitewashed version of African and African American history. The curriculum not only should be accurate and comprehensive, but must be made part of the core curriculum so every Clayton student is educated on the painful yet essential facts of American history. Students should not just learn about Martin Luther King Jr., but also Marcus Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, and countless other civil rights leaders, Black artists, musicians, actors, athletes, inventors, and business people. Students should know who Henrietta Lacks is and how racism pervades all institutions in American society: education, healthcare, housing, banking, the criminal justice system, voting, and more. Clayton students deserve to have a thorough and accurate education when it comes to these incredibly important topics. By not providing education to them early in their educational careers, the district is not only complicit in the ignorance of its students, but it is not developing leaders who shape the world through independency, creativity, and critical thinking, as it so envisions. Now is the time for radical change and to set an example for the rest of school districts in St. Louis and across the state of Missouri. If you choose to ignore our pleas at this time, just know that we will not give up this fight. We will not back down until all of these changes are made. Every policy change, every administrative decision, every substantive discussion that district officials, elected or otherwise, has about these issues needs to be publicly summarized and available for review so that all concerned students, staff, parents, and alumni can hold this district accountable to its promise.
Thank
That's
you,
all.
Ariane.
Wow.
Thanks, Chris, for reading that, and thanks, Ariane, for your public comment. So we're actually going to move to the election results next. But we're going to do kind of election results and recognition of service, which is 3.01. And so I guess before we move to kind of the actual results, I know, Lily, I certainly want to thank you again for your service. I know Kristen couldn't make this meeting, but would thank her also. I know, Lily, you said you wanted to say something, so I would certainly give you an opportunity to say something now if you'd like.
Thank you. Boy, this has been a long last term. It extended a few extra months and a week. So thank you, Joe. I want to say congratulations to Kim and Gary and David. And please do great work for our students in our community. Remember that each of you has an equal voice, an equal vote, and equal responsibility. And each of you were elected by our community. Make sure that you have the information that you need, that you're fully informed to make the best decisions for our kids. You each bring your own valuable perspective and share it with the community and the board. I'm leaving the board to allow myself more time and focused energy on anti-racism work in both my professional and community life. I promised several of you that I would help you to continue to push the district forward on our racial equity initiative. I will follow through on my promise. Jason said something similarly. We kind of toss around the terms like using a racial equity lens or equity as a through line in all of our work. We all need to push to get beyond the words and make this a reality. We need to disrupt the status quo. So I will see you all very soon at your next meeting. You plan to revisit the racial equity initiative, and I plan to be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. So we're going to move on to the I'm going to read out the results. And so the results, just as they appear on the agenda, are David Gulick with 1,213 votes at 20%. Kimberly or Kim Hurst with 1,432 votes at 23.6%. Nathaniel Millett, 792 votes, 13.1%. Gary Pearson, 1,422 votes at 23.4%. And Christine Wynn, 1,204 votes, 19.9%. So of course, that means the winners are David Gulick, Kim Hurst, and Gary Pearson. So congratulations to all three of you. So what we do, it's a little bit different for a board meeting. We actually adjourn this board to what we call Sina Day, and the superintendent, right, Sean, takes over the both the swearing in of the three folks, right? Gary re-swearing in, and Kim and David, right? So David, you can come on. You can come on, and then we actually move to as a new board. We move to the election of officers in our board orientation. So I guess we probably need a motion to move into adjourn the board to Sina Day, right?
All right, I move that the Board of Education adjourn Sina DA.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, passes 6-0. So Sean, it's yours.
Thank you, Joe. So according to state law, we shall swear in the new board members within 14 days of the election. And so the first step that we're going to do is to swear in our new board members, and we're going to go in alphabetical order. So the first one is David. So David, what we're going to do is have you come on the screen, raise your right hand. Oh, I see you now. Raise your right hand. And then you're going to repeat after me the oath of office. Okay. And first of all, I just want to say thank you. I want to say congratulations to everyone. I know how much work you put into this, and truly appreciate the time and energy that you dedicated to this. And it's for the children of our district. And I also want to say thank you to Chris and Nate too, for all the time that they put into this, and we'll definitely be relying on their voices in the future in different ways. So David, raise your right hand. I, David Gulick,
I, David Gulick,
do solemnly affirm that I'm at least 24 years of age,
do solemnly affirm that I'm at least 24 years of age,
that I'm a citizen of the United States,
that I'm a citizen of the United States,
and a resident taxpayer of the School District of Clayton,
and a resident taxpayer of the School District of Clayton,
in St. Louis County in the state of Missouri,
in St. Louis County in the state of Missouri,
and that I will support the constitutions of the United States and the state of Missouri,
and that I will support the constitutions of the United States and of the state of Missouri,
and that I will abide by and uphold
and that I will abide by and uphold
the School District of Clayton Board Member Code of Ethics,
the School District of Clayton Board Member Code of Ethics,
and will faithfully conduct myself in office.
and will faithfully conduct myself in office.
Congratulations, David. Welcome to the board.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.
Next, we have Kimberly Hurst. So Kim, if you could please raise your right hand. I, Kimberly Hurst,
I, Kimberly Hurst,
do solemnly affirm that I'm at least 24 years of age,
do solemnly affirm that I am at least 24 years of age,
that I'm a citizen of the United States,
that I'm a citizen of the United States,
and a resident taxpayer of the School District of Clayton,
and a resident taxpayer of the School District of Clayton,
in St. Louis County and in St. Louis County in the state of Missouri,
in St. Louis County in the state of Missouri,
and that I will support the constitutions of the United States and the state of Missouri,
and that I will support the constitutions of the United States and the state of Missouri,
and that I will abide by and uphold the School District of Clayton School Board Member Code of Ethics.
and that I will abide by and uphold the School District of Clayton Board Member Code of Ethics,
And will faithfully conduct myself in office.
and will faithfully conduct myself in office.
Congratulations, Kim. Welcome to the board.
Thank you.
And then Gary Pearson. And Gary's our incumbent. And so Gary, if you could please raise your right hand, sorry. I, Gary Pearson,
I, Gary Pearson,
do solemnly affirm that I'm at least 24 years of age,
do solemnly affirm that I am at least 24 years of age,
that I'm a citizen of the United States and a resident taxpayer of the School District of Clayton,
that I'm a citizen of the United States and a resident taxpayer of the School District of Clayton
in St. Louis County in the state of Missouri,
in St. Louis County in the state of Missouri,
and that I will support the constitutions of the United States and the state of Missouri,
and that I will support the constitutions of the state of Missouri and of the United States,
and that I will abide by and uphold the School District of Clayton Board Member Code of Ethics.
and that I will abide by and uphold the School District of Clayton Board Member Code of Ethics,
And I will faithfully conduct myself in office.
and I will faithfully conduct myself in office.
Congratulations, Gary. Welcome back to the board.
Thank you.
I love all the clappy things that are on the. So we now have sworn in our board members. So as the next step of this process is the election of the officers. And so at this point, as the superintendent, I'm going to call for nominations for the president of the Board of Education. And so do we have any nominations for that role?
Sean, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, because I've got bad reception over here, but I would like to, I move that we keep the officers the same as we had last year.
So,
And I will-
so your motion was to keep the officers in the same positions as last year. So that would be Joe as president, Amy Rubin as vice president, Jason Wilson as treasurer, and Gary Pearson as secretary. Did I hear a second?
A second.
Second.
I have something to say.
Any discussion?
Yeah. So, I've been on the board for 2 years, and I've seen a lot of things in the way of plans and, like I said before, a lot of words about around equity and things that we're going to do. But yet and still, we kind of wallow in this space of complacency, and things aren't necessarily getting done. And this is not a knock toward any one person, but it's more so a knock toward the ethos around the school board of Clayton and the community as well, like just the overall arching community. So I say all that to say it's going to be tough to sit here for another year and possibly watch things not change. There's a history of things not getting better. Now, that's not on all levels. That's not an indictment on one person either, or one regime or term where a principal was in charge. This is just an aggregate perspective of what's transpired over the years. And I think a lot of you all would, if you sat and thought about it, could agree with me. Things have not changed. Test scores for African Americans, kids have not gotten better. Racism is the same as it was maybe 10 years ago, 15, 20. There's still these issues that keep popping up on a consistent basis, not just with Black kids, with Jewish kids, with kids that are Asian, kids that are of all ethnicities, all faiths, and it's problematic for learning in the classroom. It prohibits the best of us. I have a saying that's not my saying, but steel sharpens steel. So if everyone isn't great, it isn't at their best, how can we do better? And steel sharpens steel. So if we're all not playing at the same pace, we're all not on the same field, metaphorically in basketball, for example, then we all can't be playing our best game. And once again, this is not an indictment toward Joe Miller or anyone else on the board. This is just me saying that I know history. History hasn't changed. And I want to see the ball get rolling on a lot of different things, a lot of things that we talked about. Another thing that I want to mention is that we do these 2-year studies. So we have new people coming on the board. We started a study in 19. And so when someone rolls off the board next year, that study comes up for review in 21. And there could possibly be no one who's familiar with the study. Sometimes it has to do with race, equity, especially the word equity, and it's loose terminology that is, the word equity. And then it becomes tertiary or quaternary in terms of importance. And now all of a sudden today, or in the last 2 weeks, everyone is now engaged in the idea of race being at the forefront and very important. Well, I want to make sure that it is. I would like to be the president of the board. I think I can help steer the district in the right direction, help Sean, help the board. It's tough doing it from this position. Not that I can't do it, not that it can't be done. Like I said, this is not an indictment toward Joe Miller or Gary or Kim or David, Stacy, and Amy, no one. This is just me saying, we got to make some stuff happen. And uh-oh. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm back. I don't know what happened, man. The screen flipped out. All right. So my point is that we got to make some stuff happen, and I want to be a part of that process. I want to be an impact player. I want to be on a team that has an impact on the long-term effects of the school district. So that's where I am.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Since I'm sitting in the chair where.
So one more thing. Also, I feel it's kind of odd that I find this process odd that the day people are voted in, that then they are then forced to vote on a process that they're really not privy to firsthand. I find that to be problematic because they may not know. They may be going off of a relationship that they have or something, and that doesn't bode well for effective governing. So just want to make sure I say that one last thing. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
It's okay.
I'll mute it.
So I appreciate your comments, Jason. I guess what I would just have to say, and I just have to respectfully say that I will say that it's hard for me to hear that saying nothing is being done. And I think that I have to represent the work of the administrators who are sitting in this room, sitting in this meeting, and the teachers that are working each day. And I will say that, yes, we have heard some really difficult things recently, but it can't negate all the work that we have been doing up to this point. And I can't sit and just say that nothing has been done. And so I just have to say that, because it's not true. I think we definitely have done a lot and have had some difficult conversations. We haven't arrived, but I just feel like I need to say that. And
No, I hear what you're saying. All I'm saying is that I'm not saying that we need to get caught up on the one thing I said of things not getting done ever. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying that we have put in the work. We have put in some work. We've done some great research. We have moved the ball. If it's 100 yards, we moved the ball some inches though. If this were white students in any way not getting what they need to be successful, we would be up in arms. And I said, and so what's funny is, what's interesting is that this is nothing new. This is nothing new that I haven't said at the board table. I think when we first sat down and saw the scores, the test scores of the African-American children, Black and brown, compared to everybody else, we were all like, some of us said, and I'm not saying this is a quote unquote, but like, this is kind of par for the course. This is kind of how it is around the nation. And that, to me, that's intolerable. There's not a game I play, there's not anything I do in life where I can accept less than average. And so I'm not saying that you all, the administration, hasn't done some great work. Sean, I told you on your own offline, and you, man, I think highly of all of you. I told you I think highly of Joe. This is just our conversation kind of coming to light, but I've told you that. But that's not the point. The point is that I want to push on the board to really get more out of everybody. There's no reason why a school district with the resources that we have and the privileges that we have, we're not just slightly better. We should be head and shoulders above the rest and leading the charge in education as well as innovative stuff, and working with other folks who are doing good things in other areas with less resources. I'm not saying we haven't. I'm just saying we should be doing more of that. Just because we're a wealthy district doesn't mean we have all the answers. There are folks out there who are doing some phenomenal things. Joe, you can attest to Pattonville has done some amazing things in some amazing areas. Ladue is doing some cool things. Brentwood is doing some cool things. But we're talking about Clayton, and we're talking about being leaders and being head and shoulders above the rest. And one area I think we need some push in that I think will impact all other areas is having an impact in African Americans' experiences at the school, specifically in education. So this is not, once again, this is not an indictment. Don't hold me down on one word or one thing I said that you find a flaw, you find an argument, but just hear me out and understand what I'm saying.
No, I appreciate it.
I want to be effective, that's all.
So the reality is we're in a motion right now, and I think that there was a second, and we're still in discussion. And so any other discussion?
Sean, can I speak to the motion?
Yes.
So I appreciate the comments of others. I will speak in favor of the motion of keeping the officers or essentially appointing the same officers in the same roles that we've had for the last year. I gave that a lot of thought myself in terms of what I wanted my role to be on the board, and felt like I had the capacity to put in to the board and to what I thought the talents and the strengths of each of us were in terms of that leadership. I don't think that I make a perfect secretary. I don't think any of us are perfect at any of these officer roles, but I do feel confident in the roles and the experiences that we have. I did want to also clarify one thing because it's not on our agenda. It was brought up why we would do this at this meeting. That is actually according to the statute that the board has to organize itself and elect at least a president and vice president. We don't have to elect the treasurer and the secretary. We don't have to do that part tonight, and the motion that was offered included that. But I'm in favor of the motion. Having heard the criticism and the things that you're saying, Jason, I'm still in favor of it, and including your role in those officer positions.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I want to say something too. So, Jason, I appreciate your comments. I'm a little surprised by them, but I appreciate them. I'm still in favor of the motion. I think we ought to have the continuity. I think it's helpful for the district to have a continuity. I agree there's some changes we can make, but I respectfully disagree with your decision in putting yourself forward as president.
Any other discussion? So all in favor? Can you show by your hand, all in favor? Okay. All opposed? Okay. So the motion passes 6-1. And so we're going to maintain the current officers of Joe Miller, President, Amy Rubin, Vice President, Jason Wilson, Treasurer, and Gary Pearson as the Secretary. And so, Joe, at this point, I'm going to turn back over the meeting to you.
Great. Thank you, Sean, and thank you, everybody. I think actually at this point, we would have done kind of some facsimile stuff, but since the officers are the same, we don't need to do 5.01, I don't think, right? There's
Right.
no need to sign anything.
Yes. So
Yeah, we just move on to the orientation. And I think Sean, so really this piece is just as a reminder to the board. Typically what we would do is we'd have somebody from the outside come in. We had somebody from MSBA come in last time. Last year, we've had attorneys come in, but we thought that rather than have somebody come in virtually, we'd kind of have a discussion amongst ourselves and an orientation amongst ourselves. However, what we would do is hopefully do that later. So we have kind of Sean's going to talk a little bit about kind of the first part, and then Amy and myself will talk a little bit about kind of being a board member. So I guess I'll turn it back over to you, Sean.
okay. So one of the things that I wanted to do first was I shared a folder with all of you, and I know sometimes it's hard to look at documents and to also be on the screen at the same time. So I am actually going to try to share my screen with you. But what I want to do is start off by just saying that we're going to spend some time just kind of launching us. And as Joe said, that this is just an initial or onboarding type of meeting just to kind of get you acclimated to being a new board member. But what we've decided that it's really important that every year we give our board the opportunity for learning and to come back to some of these concepts that are so imperative to be an effective board member. And so so what we're going to do now is one of the things that's really important is that we have norms for how we're going to work with one another, and just making sure that we're adhering to those when we meet with one another. And so and Chris, I'm going to try to share my screen and hopefully this works. Maybe not. So I'm having a hard time doing that, but I'm going to go ahead and if you wanted to look in your shared document, the norms that we have been working by are demonstrating respect for one another and our mutual learning, making sure that we're contributing, making sure we're actively participating, and demonstrating collegial relationships. I think that one of the things that's really important is that as a board, you have the ability to debate issues, have the ability to not always agree on something, but it's really important that you maintain that collegial relationship. We want to make sure that our meetings are purposeful, organized, and include adequate time for processing. And then also practicing that skill of listening with intent and making sure we're sharing the airspace. One of the things that we did this year as a board was spend some time reading a book called The Governance Core by Davis Campbell and Michael Fullen. And this was an opportunity for our board to do some common learning around what it means to be a highly effective board. And when we read this book together this year, one of the things that we felt was really important was really making sure that we were working with a moral imperative. And that moral imperative is that relentless commitment to the learning of all of our students, no matter their zip code, no matter their race, no matter their background, is that we are committed to their learning and growth. That moral imperative also includes that we lead with collective action. And so when we're discussing and debating, we may not always agree upon something, but once something is decided upon, we move forward collectively and support whatever decisions made by the board. And then that moral imperative is something that always drives our decisions. So some of the examples that are given as part of this book is that a moral imperative might be that all students achieve, and we will not allow for disparities in achievement. All students will have quality teachers, and all students will have a safe and healthy learning environment. Safe meaning both physically and emotionally. And so when I've seen Fullen talk sometimes, a couple times about this book, is that it's always having us come back to that moral imperative with every decision that we're making. And that when we are disagreeing about something, if we always come back to that common moral imperative about what's in the best interest of our students, that will help move our district forward. The other thing that's really important as part of this work was having that governance mindset. And when we're thinking about a governance mindset, is that the decisions we make, we have to understand that they impact other things that are happening within the district. All of our decisions are intertwined. And a truly effective system is one where decisions permeate throughout the entire system. We also need to make sure that we have a strategic focus. And when we talk about strategic focus, is that we have measurable goals and measurable steps towards those goals. That as a board member, you always come to the table as a learner first, and making sure that you are taking time to learn about programs, learn about issues, learning about what's happening in the district, so that way you can make the best decision possible. And then also, just as an elected official, knowing that public manner that you have, that our students are looking to you to be a model, and our citizens are looking to you to be representatives of their voices. As a district, we are constantly needing to push ourselves from being what we call an excellent school district to a transformational district. And you are joining the board at a time when you have the opportunity to be true leaders of change. And when we are talking about the next steps of our strategic plan, we are looking at doing things differently than we've ever done in the past, in terms of providing personalized learning approaches for our students, making sure that each student feels safe and valued, and also making sure that we're doing whatever's possible to maintain the social emotional well-being of our students. And I shared with you some examples of the action steps that we are going to be taking as part of our strategic plan. And one of the proposals that I am going to present to the board tonight is that I want to set up new structures for the board and you collaboratively develop them where we have an advisory that's connected to the strategic plan. And that advisory would be looking at the goals, looking at the measurements attached to those goals. And then that would inform the work at the board table. The other thing that I am going to propose that we look at differently is that starting a new advisory around equity and race. And in this folder that I shared with you, we had a summary report of our current equity and excellence summary report that speaks to some of the work that we're doing around racial equity within the district. And I want to share with you that the way that we designed this report is that it's based on that a continuum that we've been using that is around where we want to be as a district. And our district wants to be a transformational district. We don't want to be at the end where it's status quo, where we're not doing anything. We don't want to stay at a place where we're just building awareness. We don't want to just have pockets of sustained success, like few things. We want to have a system change. And so there are proposals in here and a focus area, the areas are focused on those systemic steps that we feel are necessary for us to really make some changes around our work around racial equity. And I think that one of the things that we need to do is be even more explicit about it. When this initiative started in 2016, that was the best thinking at the time. And our focus was on African-American students because we saw that there was disparities in our data and there was disparities in representation in our programs. And we initiated different steps and focus areas that were around 5 different dimensions. And we have been taking steps towards those. But one of the things that we do need to do differently is that we need to be more explicitly focused on systems that promote institutional racism. And we've been talking about breaking cycles and doing things differently. And we are completely committed to doing things differently. And I think that so the other proposal that I have is that we will start a new board advisory around equity and race, and that we'd have board members and community members that are on there that are going to hold us accountable to these goals. And I think that the initiative needs to be rewritten, and we need to figure out what are those goals that are going to drive us into the future. And so connected with our strategic plan, when we're talking about equitable experiences, this document that we've shared with you is the steps moving forward towards how we look at that equitable approach for our students. And we really have to be very explicit about dealing with racism and really promoting anti-racism within our district. And those aren't just words, those are what we need to do. And we are committed to that. And so I'd ask the board to take a look at that. We're going to make this document public tomorrow and put it on the website so people can start seeing some of the things that we're working towards. But so as a board, when we're talking about your responsibility, it's about holding us accountable to that strategic work, holding us accountable to making sure that we have the right measurements in place, holding us accountable to make sure we're having those action steps. And the way we're approaching the strategic plan is that we don't want to develop one that is going to sit on a shelf for 3 years. It's going to be one that we keep coming back to, and it's evolving, and it's an evergreen model where we're reviewing it, we're revising it, and we're making sure that it's evidence informed. And so, so we wanted just to make sure that you got a little bit of grounding in what we're doing as we move forward. I would ask that you take a look at some of those documents. Amy and Joe are going to talk a little bit more about what work we have been doing around the board's development. And then we're also going to give you some homework at the end just for us to do some processing. But I really do think that in order for this board to come together very cohesively, we need to be together. It's hard for us to have this 2-dimensional type of meeting, and we can't have time for really strong interactions. And so we were intentional about pushing back our orientation to a point where we could be together and we could collaborate and we could talk in a way that's going to be more highly effective. So I'm going to stop right there because I've said a lot. I'm just seeing if you had any questions before I turn it over to Amy and Joe.
Yeah, I guess I'll ask a question. I mean, my first question is who's going to hold us accountable? Who's going to make sure we stay on task, that we continue to revisit this on a consistent basis?
Who's going to hold us accountable to that? I think that our community, but also we have to hold ourselves accountable. And so we have to keep coming back and asking the questions. Like one of the things that we've heard this year when we did our equity update in March was that we don't take enough time to come back and have these conversations. And so we feel like if we have a structure that has community members on it, students, parents, and board members, that is going to be a mechanism for holding ourselves accountable and also giving us direction in which way we want to go.
Right. So I appreciate that. That's a great answer. That's a good point, Sean. I guess my question is, the interest in doing so, like where has it been prior, and why do we think it's going to be effective now going forward? We've been talking about this for the longest. You know, I'm just saying, and once again, this is not a knock toward the idea. You know, I'm all for it. I just want to make sure we have a dialogue, and I don't want to always be the one talking, you know, being labeled as the guy who's always talking about race. But
I would say that there is, this work has taken several different iterations. So when it first started, we had a steering committee. That group of people came together and came up with the focus areas for what we wanted to do in terms of the dimensions. And then we started, that steering committee was in place for a few years. But what I would say is that sometimes our best ideas kind of need to be revised and revisited in order to make sure that they actually they're being effective. At some point, at one point I felt like that steering committee was more centered on just reporting out versus taking action. And an advisory board, you think, is more around keeping the board on the, making sure the board is truly informed of the work that's happening, making sure the board has voice to the work that's happening, making sure community members have voice to that. And then it's basically kind of just a new iteration of the work that we've done. But I think that this has been something that's been on, if you see all the documents that we've come forward with and that we've tried to make this a focus. And I know people feel like the word through line may not be an effective word, but through line is that every decision we make has to have that, it has to also say, is this in the best interest of our students? Is this in the best interest of our Black students? Is it in the best interest of their learning and their opportunity? So I would say that it's just a different way of thinking. And I think that we've, you know, the initiative that we started in 2016 needs to be revised. And I think that we need to think about what are the goals that the board, and that was a board directive at that time. So the board needs to be thinking about what direction we need to go now, so that way we can feel like we're moving forward to collectively and together all in the same direction.
Gotcha. I guess what I'm thinking is, we've romanticized the idea of it by writing these amazing pieces, documents that explain what the through line looks like. But I mean, I'm just looking, I want to make sure that we are going to implement, like you just said, active, right? So there's some action-oriented directives on the back end of all this. And it's kind of hard to have this conversation over Zoom, man. But like, I just want to make sure there's some action-oriented next steps. I mean, I honestly feel like, Sean, that we've done a lot of stuff kind of already. We kind of already have a good blueprint. I guess my question is, and this is just a question, like, what are we going to do? Like, what low-hanging fruit things can we do right now to ensure the public that we're going to crack down on the idea of discrimination and racism, especially when it comes to ethnicity? Like, what low-hanging fruits out there right now? For example, like, I don't know, like, I'm just tossing some stuff out, so don't hold me accountable for this. But like, teachers, for example, if something happens, automatic, I don't know, automatic suspension with no pay to investigation. I mean, really just trying to, because these are non-negotiables, right? I think discrimination and racism is so violent, it's a non-negotiable, and that when it happens, we need to treat it as such. So, what low-hanging fruit, similar to what I just said, doesn't have to be what I just said, but like, what low-hanging fruit is out there that we can implement, rather fast, and not more hastily, but rather fast, to ensure people that we are trying to make the right decisions out of beyond the fact that we're going to do what you just proposed, which is.
So, wait, Sean,
So,
stop. I want to jump in.
Sean,
Can I
Yeah.
jump
let me
in?
just say something. Jason, I love what you're saying, and I think you're right. I'm worried right now that this topic was not really on the agenda for tonight. We're supposed to be doing the onboarding and we didn't post it publicly. So I'm wondering, Joe and Gary, if this is a problem that we're going down this I think it's an important rabbit hole, but I'm just wondering procedurally if it's problematic that we're, without posting it for the public, that we're going down this rabbit hole tonight.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, it's board orientation, right? It's listed as board orientation, and we're going to a different discussion. So I do think we have to be careful. We can have that discussion, we can post it, but it's not really fair to the public to, embed.
But it feels like a discussion that a lot of people might want to be able to listen to, is what I guess what I'm.
Yeah, and my intention in including this information in the orientation documents is that I feel like it's important for the board to understand the strategic direction we're going, and then also just to know that equity and the conversation about racism has to be part of this conversation. And so I apologize if I was the one that inserted that, but I just felt it was important that we made this part of knowing the direction where we're going as a district and with the board. So.
Right. No, I mean, it's super important. I just don't want us to be talking about something and then our community isn't able to hear what we're talking about.
I mean, maybe to that point, I did want to clarify, because I think you said this, Sean, and you're talking about in the folder of information that you provided to us, the board members, there's a report about, there's a number of documents, including a report of the equity, sort of a progress report, 20 page reports or something.
Yeah.
And that is what you said is equity and excellence summary. Sorry, I was trying to use the title, but I couldn't pull it up at the time. That's what you said is going to be made public, but has not been made public yet. Is that right?
Yeah, and so we're committed to putting that on our website, and similar to the other reports that we've done. But I just we told the board that we would have something by today, and wanted to have that. I think what I was going to do is give it as homework, as future discussion as we think about an advisory, and also wanted to get some input later on down the road about what that advisory would look like. But I just it was an update about really a summary of where we've been this year and where we're moving next. So, and then
Thanks, man. Appreciate it, guys.
So at this point, I wanted to see if Amy and Joe wanted to talk about what it means to be highly effective boards and thinking about some of the ideas that we've had and some of the work that we've done around protocols to be highly effective. So
Thanks, Sean. I'll jump in. And again, it's hard to, if you looked at the presentation that Sean was kind of starting to go through, you would see there's kind of 4 points. He talks about highly effective boards. First, they're student-centered. So hopefully that's obvious, right? That's our mission. We should all be focused first and foremost. And so proud, by the way, that we have a student on our board. I think that's awesome. Second, that we can debate without compromising collegiality. So we're not always going to agree. We shouldn't always agree. But we do have to move forward with one voice. And that we use protocols, right? So that we have certain agreements of how we're going to work together. And I just want to say a couple other things maybe that aren't in the presentation that Sean sent out. One is it's a very interesting time in the history of Clayton School Boards, by the way. We're not only a new board, but we're, in terms of years of service, we're one of the newest boards, certainly that I can think of, right? There is nobody among us that is in their 3rd term. Everybody is in there, which is really interesting, right? Amy is the most senior member of this board, moving into her 6th year. And I am the next most senior, moving into my 5th year. And that's pretty unique for Clayton, right? Clayton has had folks 20 years, 9 years, 12 years, 15 years. And so it actually gives us an opportunity, right, to, we've talked about some of the historic stuff, and that's a great benefit, but it actually is a great opportunity, right? Because we're all relatively new. And so I want to honor that, right? And note that, right? If you all haven't noted that, I will note that. So that I think we want to use that as a positive. And then you think about the role of a board member, right? We're overall fiduciary, strategic, we're policy, governance. And Sean talked about the governance core book, which I think is great. Part of the homework, if folks haven't read it, so I don't know, Kim and David, if you're aware of it, but if, we'll get you a copy of it and you can read it and we'll kind of talk about that as we move forward. But I want to also note that, and Lily said this a little bit in her goodbye remarks, but, we each have one vote, right? We're 1 of 7, right? No one person, right? We work as a collective, right? Which means that it takes 4, 5, 6, or 7 votes, right? No one of us will get anything done, right? We have to work together, and that's important, right? That's really important. And I just want to honor that, honor the relationship, but also honor the, collective working together. It doesn't have to be 7-0, but it's got to be 4-3, 5-2, 6-1, or 7-0, right? They all pass. They all count the same in terms of it moves forward, right? And then just a couple other things I'll say, and then I'll let Amy say anything she wants. But I also want to note that in the governance core book says this, and I believe it very strongly, you actually can't take your board member hat off. Not in public, not in private. It's not the way it works, right? So when I go talk to my 10th grader's math teacher and I say, you know what, I'm just Joe Miller, a parent. Doesn't work that way. I'm Joe Miller, a parent who happens to be on the Clayton School Board. And we have to remember that, right? And be sensitive to that, right? That is, and it's not to say I'm not going to advocate for my own 10th grader at Clayton High School, my youngest child, or well, now 11th grader, I guess, moving to 11th grade. But I have to realize and recognize that, and I would ask each of us to, right? We're not, we need to be respectful that you're a board member, right? We're all board members. And then just the final thing I want to say is, it really is the 7 of us plus our superintendent, right? It's a gang of, and actually really 8 of us with a student rep, right? So 9 of us overall, 7 electives, student rep, and our superintendent. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the social discipline window, but it talks about to, for, with, and not, right? So our relationship with our superintendent, by the way, which is our only employee, is with, right? We want to work with our superintendent, right? We don't do things for, and we don't do things to, and we don't blow off our superintendent, and we don't go around our superintendent, right? That is, that's part of the deal, right? It's a with, right? And I'm happy to send that to you. It's a kind of restorative justice practice kind of philosophy that we work with, not to, not, and not for. And that speaks to kind of the final part, which is the protocols. You know, you all, right? So David and Kim, as I look at you on my screen, you were at the high school library when we were talking about protocols, right? And hopefully the protocols are with the board too. So we need to actually finalize some of the onboarding and protocols. But what was part of our challenge, because we hadn't codified some of the protocols from before, quite honestly, a couple of the protocols we created felt like more like 2 protocols, because we had some board members who weren't following, right? Kind of the general norms of working together. And so the hope is, though, that we don't get to that point, right? We don't need to address that as a board. We get to work with one another. And so maybe I'll just pause there and see if you have anything to add, Amy.
Thanks, Joe and Sean. I think you guys both did a great job covering it. The one thing I'll add, and I think that Sean or Joe, one of you guys mentioned this, that really, you know, we're here. The reason we do this is for the kids, and it's not for, you know, as a board member, it's, you know, it's not for my kid or your kid or any of our individual kids, but it's for every kid that walks through the doors of our school. And so when we make decisions, it's incumbent upon us as a board member to make that decision in an informed way, such that every single kid that walks through our door is going to receive, you know, an equitable education and a fair education and a top-notch education too. So, you know, there's times I think when you might have to, you know, put your own, I don't know how to, you put your own wishes aside almost for the good of the entirety, and what's best for every child. But I welcome Kim and David. I think that this will probably be one of the most meaningful experiences that you do in your life. And I wonder if if you guys have any questions, or if Jason or Stacy or Gary, if any of you guys have any words of wisdom, feel free to say it.
I think you guys kind of said it all. I wasn't prepared to say anything, but I think that covers it.
I lost audio for a little bit, so I might have missed a little bit of this, but I just sounds like you were kind of opening it up for other comments. One thing that I think I said to both Kim and David, I know I've said it to a lot of other people over the last however many months this campaign was. I think that Joe's point about always being a board member and not being able to take that hat off is one of the most, for me personally, difficult and challenging things. And it was the main reason that I was not sure I wanted to do another term for a while, because I felt real tension with that. So if that feels like a struggle, well, you certainly have me to sympathize with that. Any of you, not just Kim and David. That's the hardest part for me, is just feeling like it in some. It's I'm not able to be as much of a parent because I'm always a board member, and that can just that tension there. So I just want to acknowledge that how hard that is.
Jason, you got anything?
Yeah, man. I want to say, David and Kim, welcome aboard again. And I mean, the main thing is to be yourself. You know, be yourself. You know, at all times. Don't abuse your power. I think that's what Joe and Amy are trying to convey to you: is don't abuse your power, but be yourself for sure. You know, be cognizant about what happens in certain conversations. Be wise and not to get involved in certain things, because it does. You know, word travels back to the wrong people all the time. It can be very messy, as you can imagine. But just be, you know, just be careful about, you know, how you communicate certain things. If something comes out, I think Joe and Amy will mention this to you as well. But if someone, you know, reaches out to you about a pressing issue, you know, you should probably, you know, refer that email to Joe, right, to the board, so that Joe can see it, and then he can then make the proper, as a whole, comment to that person, as opposed to, once again, speaking out individually for the board, because it can be problematic, you know, on a simple level, but on a more serious legality level as well. So, but all these things you will definitely learn over time. But if you just take a look at the packet that we've given you, and if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to anybody on the board. And let's get after it.
I thought of something. Joe, can I say something?
Go ahead, Jason.
I just wanted to say to Kim and David, first of all, welcome to the board. And I wouldn't feel like you always have to say something. I feel like I spent the majority of my first year listening to a lot and not necessarily speaking as much, because I think there is so much to learn from everyone that's been on the board longer than I have. So I just wanted to point that out. I think that you'll spend a lot of time this year listening and learning, and I don't want you to ever feel pressured to contribute if you don't feel prepared or you're not ready to. But if you certainly have questions, like Jason said, come and ask any of us.
That's a great point, Stacy.
Yeah, so those all great points. Thank you. And what I want to say too is, you know, we're trying to improve as a board and make this board as strong as it can and be. And I think one of the things that maybe we haven't done recently, maybe other boards did it, but we haven't, is we want to actually offer you each, Kim and David, kind of a direct mentor. So I'm going to work with you directly, Kim, as a mentor, and David, Amy's going to work with you directly. And not that you can't reach out to any of the board members. Of course you can. Of course you can. But I think that's something we didn't do and maybe should have, because even to Jason's point, there's some simple things like the public sends us an email and not everybody responds because, one, it can get us in legal jeopardy, but two, it becomes a public discussion, right? So the board president responds on behalf of the board, right? And when you're a new board member, you might not know that, right? Or whatever, from the small to the large, right? So Amy and I will work with you even on that. If you haven't read the Governance Core book, right? We'll can talk to you about that and all other things and kind of help guide you. And my hope is, as we move forward and have new folks on the board, it's something we've talked about. Again, probably something we should have done, and something all of us could have benefited from, right? That didn't have that. So 5 of us didn't have that. But for the 2 of you and moving forward, we want to try to have that, right? So, because we want you to have that opportunity. And I think we also, Sean talked about homework, right? And this is really for the whole board. There's a folder of stuff, right, that Sean sent us. And it has everything from a 5 or 6 page summary from MSBA on, you know, kind of a mini tutorial on Robert's Rules of Order and how a, you know, meeting should run, to, you know, the equity piece, to, you know, the kind of overall PowerPoint on kind of effective boards and strategic plan. So the idea is, you know, we have this board orientation document, again, that you all saw, that many of us helped create, but we do want to finalize that as we move forward. And we purposely waited, by the way, to have a new board. So we purposely waited because we knew, right, we were going to have a couple new board members. And so, you know, that's material to have 2 of 7 new. And so we want your voice, Kim and David, and we want everybody else's voice too. And we'll have a new student rep too, right? Adam will roll off. So we'll actually have another person too in the fall. So maybe I'll just pause there. Any questions or comments? Any other questions or comments?
So I just wanted the board to know that the onboarding document is linked in that agenda, and you could go to it. I've shared it with both David and Kim. And then we also purchased these books for you, so that way you have them. The other thing that we'll have to give you an orientation on is how to use Board Docs. And Board Docs is the mechanism for us to store all the information. And you've probably seen the public side of it, but there's a board side of it. And so we will be giving you some training to get logged in, and so you can get access to all the documents, which include executive documents as well that are confidential. So I think the only thing that I would say is that being on the board, you have it's like a real opportunity for change. And I think that there's a lot of joy that you can experience in being part of the board as well. And I think that it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of prep, and it's the hardest volunteer job you'll ever have, elected official. But I think that we can really have some fun with this and really think about ways that we can be different and innovative and moving the district forward. So I think it's an exciting time.
And I don't think, you know, I mean, our next piece really is to move to adjournment. But before we do that, I do want to say one other thing, which is we are going to have another meeting, right? Yet because remember, we delayed this meeting from the 3rd to the 10th. What we're talking about, because I know actually Stacy has a conflict next week. So I want you all to check, could you have our last meeting? Because typically what we do is we have a last meeting sometime in June. It's usually early June. And then we don't meet again until August. Of course, if we had to have an emergency meeting, we would call it. But typically we take July off. And so the question is, could you all have our last meeting in 2 weeks from tonight, which would be the 24th? Would you all be available for a meeting, our last final meeting? Because we do need to do some things to close out the year. We need to finalize a budget. We need to do Sean's review. That will be executive session, by the way. We need to vote on a student being on the board. And there's probably a couple other kind of things that we need to address, right? So I don't know, maybe since we have everybody together, will people put thumbs up if they can do the 24th? Can you do the 24th? Either way, you know? Maybe.
Kim's going old school.
Yeah, that's good. It's all right. That's good. It's all good. Gary, are you good the 24th? Maybe. Oh, we might have just lost Gary. All right, well, tentatively, we're gonna go with the 24th. We're gonna check with Gary because we just lost him. But as long as Gary can, and because we'll do an executive session and then a regular board meeting, we might need to start that, just so y'all know, like at 6. Yeah, probably at 6 or maybe even, yeah, 5:30.
5:30, I think would be
Yeah,
helpful.
maybe even 5:30. Just to do the executive session, and then at 7, we'd have the open meeting. And Gary, I don't know if you're back with us. Can you do the 24th? Maybe? All right, well, this is what it is. Okay, so I think that's it. Again, so excited, Kim and David, to add you to our board. Fantastic. Really gonna be cool to have both of your voices. Really excited. So I think we just need a motion to adjourn. Somebody want to move to adjourn?
I'll do it. Since, I move that the board adjourns.
All right. Is there a
Second.
second? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Appreciate
Have a
it.
good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.